Today we're going to talk to Tyler Austin, who created a SaaS product that will help automate and optimize our real estate marketing campaigns, allowing us to close more deals and cut costs. More about this game-changing software coming up.
Welcome to the Wealth Through Real Estate Investing Podcast, your source for real-world strategies focused on creating long-term wealth, cash flow, and financial freedom through real estate. Through guidance, tips, and stories of highly successful real estate investors and thought leaders, we provide you the tools to succeed and to reach the lifestyle you always wanted. And now, your host, Dwaine Clarke.
Hello and welcome back to the Wealth Through Real Estate Investing Show. This is your host, Dwaine Clarke, and today we have Tyler Austin. Tyler is the founder of REISift. Tyler, thank you so much for joining us on the show, and how you doing, my friend?
Dude, I'm doing fantastic, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. So like I mentioned into the intro, you have created this great service, but I understand that you do a lot of stuff. You're a real estate investor, consultant. So kind of start off with, starting with your story, how you got started, and what your current focus on.
Yeah, dude. Again, I appreciate it. So I started real estate not too long ago now. I guess it gets further and further the more I think about it. But about 3 or 4 years now. I think it was 2017 roughly. At the time, I had got out of active duty in like 2015, switched over, had like a $27,000 a year job. I was getting super frustrated, got a job back with the government again, and slowly kind of worked my way up into that. But in 2017, I was just kind of like ready to still like break out. Like I still felt like there was so much more. Like, why did I even get out the military if I was just going to go back work for the government again, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I was traveling 50% of the year, and I said, you know what, I'm gonna look into real estate. So I did some Googling, found Bigger Pockets like many others, and learned about direct mail, learned about list source, and then I learned how to spend $10,000 and make no money by sending $10,000 of direct mail. So ultimately what ended up happening is I sent out some direct mail, got nothing back for about 4 months. And then random lead came in and it'd be my first deal. In that process though, I was, because I thought that I wasted a bunch of money, wasn't going to get anything. I stopped doing direct mail and I started basically researching to figure out why it didn't work. Come to find out, because when I came back from an engagement I was on, my mailbox, my post office box was full of the direct mail. So it turned out it was like really messy data. So I started digging into some of that. I was a cybersecurity engineer. I didn't mention that for the government. So I kind of knew about scripts and stuff like that. So I did some tweaking, built some processes. And then there in that first quarter of me actually implementing those processes, we did about 250,000. Ended up leaving my job after that quarter with the government after I got promoted. And then the rest is kind of history. Continued to build a real estate company. And then shortly after, REISift was born.
Awesome. And it's kind of like it kind of was born from the problems that you had, and you kind of like, started to kind of put the pieces together, like what can make this actually work. So you can kind of lay out kind of like the main problem I know amongst that with the data that other real estate investors face that cause them not to be successful in this business.
Yeah, man. So one of the biggest things I think that there's a misconception about and it's just simply because people don't think about the underlying, like where the data actually comes from. And all data comes from somebody who wrote on a piece of paper and physically submitted something or finger jammed it online. And because it's a human element, there's anomalies, right? Mm-hmm. So what I ended up finding out is that when you buy data from anywhere, there's things like the full name, for example. You don't want the full name that comes from a record provider to be on your direct mail piece. Ideally, you just want the first and last name, and maybe even just the first name. So there's just these formats, right, which you want to follow to bolster your efforts from the USPS, because if not, the USPS just kicks it back. So another big one is like the companies and LLC or LLCs and trusts and things like that. A lot of people will go and skip trace those, or they'll send direct mail directly to those rather than finding the owner of those, then skip tracing the owner and finding them that way. So there's the aspect of getting the data cleaned up so that we can make sure we're putting our marketing dollars to the highest yield. There's the aspect of, if you have data and you're spending money on it, making sure that you're taking that marketing budget you have and spending it on the proper records within there to yield the highest result. A good example is, like, if you have 10,000, let's say you're a newer investor, and you download 10,000 records from PropStream, or you get 10,000 records from ListSource, and now you're like, okay, cool, now I want to start marketing, but I've spent money on the data, but now I don't have as much money, for skip tracing or the direct mail. So what a lot of people do is they'll just take the top 150 records or top 500 records, because that's what they can afford to skip trace or send direct mail to. But the last 900 or the last 9,000 to 10,000 records were all vacant. And because they don't really know that that's the case, if they did know that, they could have taken that money and instead spent it on the higher yield, prospects. And I have, can mention tons of examples of other scenarios on where, people inherently, especially newer investors, spend money based off of just not knowing, really. It's just kind of, they're just taking massive imperfect action, which I totally believe in. But I believe in still making business decisions based off of metrics and what we know and understand. Because otherwise what happens is you don't get results and then you quit. And that all stems back to you coming into this business because you want to be an entrepreneur rather than, just trying to make money, and a lot of other scenarios. But that's the biggest thing. People thinking that the data is not important, but they think that the skip tracing results are more. So they're like, oh, where's the best skip trace provider? And then they skip trace it all, but then they don't even track the phone numbers they skip trace, for example. There's just, scenario after scenario after scenario.
Can you kind of walk us through I know it's kind of multifaceted service that you have that, you of course including the data, but, does it sift through, bounce it off of other records, and also you're able to do skip tracing from there, send out marketing pieces, put together marketing campaigns. Can you kind of walk us through like an overview of what this service does for investors?
Yeah. So what I would love to do is I'd love to give a practical example, right? Because I think it's the best way. For my own real estate investment company, I'll give you a deal where literally we looked at it today. I just got photos on it. Saturday, I think it was Saturday at like 12 a.m. or so, I locked up the contract. Got it under contract for $60,000. It's a property up in Crestview. We have an offer on it right now from someone that looked at it today for $120,000. So it's a $60,000 spread, which isn't abnormal for our company. It's just typically kind of where we're around is at 30 to 60,000. But the biggest thing is the reason why that is the case, right? And how can we, through understanding data, try to put us in the highest scenario? So let me paint the picture. Brand new REISift account. I get data for free from my county, tax delinquent data. I get maybe high equity data from ListSource. And now I have this data sitting in front of me. I got to figure out, okay, where do I spend my money? So I say, okay, well, I know I want to track my leads, and I know I want to understand, I want to know who I'm reaching and who I'm not reaching, so that I don't re-spend marketing dollars. Because some of those records on the equity list and some of those records on the tax delinquent list could be the same exact property. You don't want to skip trace them individually, because then you just spent double the skip tracing cost. You don't want to direct mail them differently for the same scenario. So part of data management is something that in the space we call, list stacking. I'm not a huge fan of that terminology. It's just what people call it. I just simply call it data management, because it's a byproduct of properly managing your data. So you take those two lists, you upload them into REISift, and you answer yourself a few different questions called the 4 W's to data management. Where did the data come from? Where has it been? Where is it going? And when did it happen? Because when you're building a business, you're building a business for the longevity. And in the very beginning, if we ask ourselves those questions with our data, if we ask that question now, in 6 months from now, 7 months from now, 8 months from now, we're going to benefit from that knowledge, right? We're going to know, oh, hey, that's the data I skip trace a year ago, and I actually just got a deal from it again. Because what ends up happening is people just rebuy data. But anyways, we ask ourselves that question. So we upload that ListSource list of high equity. We call it high equity in REISift. We tag it with list source and the list purchase date. Then we upload that tax delinquent list. We say it came from our county, when we got it from our county. And then what happens when it's uploaded to REISift is it's looking through that data and it's breaking it all apart into what we call clean or incomplete. Incomplete data consists of data that's missing a zip code or missing a street address, or maybe it's a trust or a company. It's data that if skip traced or sent direct mail, you're wasting money, basically. Then you have your clean data, which has went to the USPS, came back, checked for vacancy, address normalized to what the USP needs for direct mail, and all that other stuff. And it has a complete first and last name. It has a complete mailing address, complete property address, and so on. And as those two are uploading, it's then looking like, okay, 123 Main Street is on my tax delinquent list, and it's also on my high equity list, right? So let's just say there was 1,000 on both of these different lists. They upload to REISift, and now inside of REISift, it says that you only have 900 records. Well, how can that be? Well, that's because the difference of that is because those records were on both of those lists. So they merged into one single record. So what do we do now? We're at the point where we have data. We have insight on what's clean out of it and what's incomplete out of it. And now we also can see that some of those records that were on both those lists are the same, right? Same property addresses. Now we got to make the decision that all business owners hate to make. And it's like, where do we spend our money? I got to pull out my wallet now. So this is what I recommend people do, is starting off with the records that are on both high equity and tax delinquent and are also vacant, right? And maybe there's only 5, 6, 10, maybe 50 of those. But if I ask myself, if I reach all 50 of those individuals and get a yes or a no, will I be better off than skip tracing 5,000 records and just calling through it and not knowing if one of those people are someone who needs to sell or not? What we found is that in my account, for example, I have 357,000 records. We only focus on 100 of those records at a given time. We're calling through. We might have 10 phone numbers. We call a phone number. We know if we answered, and we go through those records, and we basically churn through them. So for a newer investor or anyone who's coming, trying to really save on their marketing, you can take those records that you had and you say, okay, these records are on multiple lists. These records are vacant. These are tax delinquent records that don't have high equity. And these are high equity records that aren't tax delinquent. So you go from having 2 lists to now having 4, and then you can go deeper. You're like, okay, well, I want to hone in even more. What about the records that are out-of-state homeowners that have a vacant property and they're tax delinquent, right? I know that I need to reach that person, because unless they miraculously become not tax delinquent no more, somebody's going to buy that property, whether it's before I get a hold of them or it goes to tax auction. The question is, are you going to be the person that does it? So let's take that concept. Let's go back to the deal that we have, that's $60K popper. That record, we've sent direct mail. We've tried to call all the phone numbers. We are at the point where we do what we call deep prospecting, where it means that we didn't reach the individual through anything that we could find via skip tracing or they didn't respond to us through direct mail. So we put it on Facebook. They go into Facebook marketing. And the next step would have been the deep prospecting, which is where we start finding relatives, emails, really digging into it. That person ended up converting because they found us on SEO, right? So they Google searched us and they found our website, and that's how we ended up getting that deal. But if I would have started doing the deep prospecting, because we had their email, and that's how I locked up the contract, was via email. So if we would have started the deep prospecting 3 months ago, when that record hit that stage of its life cycle, we could have possibly had this deal 3 months ago. So as a business owner, now I got to ask myself, why didn't that happen? Number one, right? And number two, why didn't that person, why couldn't we find their phone number to begin with? And it ended up being they were in jail. So they didn't have a phone number no more. Right. And if we would have done our deep prospecting, we would have searched public records, we would have seen they were incarcerated. and then we could have reached out to them through JPay and possibly locked it up again sooner. So the whole point being, the reason I give that example in that scenario is because people think they need to move and jump into other markets because there's no deals and it's saturated. But ultimately, their main reason is because everybody wants to do the easy ticket. Mm-hmm. There's a process and there's systems that you got to put in place. If we say, hey, I know I got all this data over here, I'm going to market to that in a mass way. I'm going to track my phone numbers. I'm going to do all that stuff. But at the same time, I know that there's this really small amount of people, let's say probate and out-of-state homeowners, like they're not going to come back from the dead. If you don't reach them, it's because you didn't do what was needed to reach them. You were thinking, oh, I'm going to SMS because that's cheaper for me or that's easier for me, instead of thinking like, hey, how does that person need to be reached, right? How do they need to be found? What will they respond to? And then building the processes. So ultimately, REISift in its core, the way it helps, investors is it puts the process and it enforces you to put a process around the management of your data and your marketing as a whole, keeping net profit as your forward-thinking metric rather than the amount of cold callers you have and the amount of dials you're making. You're trying to increase net profit. Mm. And then you just build the healthy marketing system around that. Are you SMSing and then cold calling? If you have 10 phone numbers, only one of them is right. So if you're doing SMS and RVMs, both of those cost you per phone number, and you just SMS through those 10 phone numbers, what were the results of that? Because if you're going to go RVM them next, you're just going to redouble the, your marketing costs again. Mm-hmm. So there's so many other scenarios, and it's just a lot of investors just don't think about it. That's all. They're not thinking about how to save money. They're thinking about how to make money. Yeah,
that's a big thing, and that's why a lot of people get out of the business. Because you think about it, you had mentioned you have a list of over 300,000 people, but you only focus on 100, and really find how you can be able to find them. Like you had went through so many different processes to get this one deal, which result in a huge potential profit for you, compared to people kind of complaining, saying there's nothing here because they just. And you mentioned it's because of they're trying to see where should they allocate their dollars and time. But if they end up having the right data, focusing on, like 100, 200 top people that they start out and get those and then kind of milk it rather than kind of just broad brushing and wasting money. And that kind of goes back to me when I first started in the business. It was just kind of a lot of shotgun. I was just kind of like going to whichever I can get for what I can afford at the time. But if I had something that was just like, here's the data, clean everything up, and then you have the right approach to it, I definitely would have took a lot of different action steps. So that's awesome. You have this service and you thought about it from all the issues that you had, starting out the business from the beginning. So that's awesome. And then go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just agreeing with you. It's 100%. Its shotgun approach is good, but what's better is having the weapon for what it's needed for, right? Like if you were to go out and you're going to be going dove hunting in Alaska, right? Whenever we would do that, like we're bringing our shotgun, right? But we also have a sidearm with us just in case something comes up, because a shotgun isn't going to take down something. It's going to run out of ammo by the time I can, defend myself against maybe a moose that's just like running at me, right? So I always give the analogy of when you go out fishing, we might go out and you see out in the water, you got a group of individuals, and most people just automatically assume if they're new to the area, they'll go in there and they'll just fish where everyone else is fishing because they think that's where people are catching fish, right? Mm-hmm. But in all reality, they're going to go over there. They're going to realize that some people are catching fish, but for whatever reason, you're still not. And it's not because there's no fish down there. It's just because they might know something that you don't. But in either scenario, you're still increasing the likelihood that you're not going to catch a fish because you're still around a lot of other individuals. Compared to if you kind of test the waters around a little bit, figure out what areas you like, what bait's good and stuff like that, then you can find that sweet hole. And once you find the sweet hole, now you start being like, okay, cool, I'm going to keep my line in the water. I'm going to get my bites. I'm going to pull up some fish. But I'm also going to start chumming off the back, right, to increase my chances that maybe something big comes in. I don't know for certain. Just like if you just cold calling through straight high equity, you don't know for certain. It's just an opportunistic sale. The person answers the phone, you want to buy, like, yeah, sure, right? There's nothing really driving them to need to. That's chumming, right? But in between there, There's the people who say, you know what, hey, you guys go ahead and fish off the front, let's chum off the back, and I'm going to go spearfishing. And a solid, stable company is the company that has a diver in the water, spearfishing, right? They have a line in the water because there's no reason not to, but you're also chumming off the back. But people start chumming off the back in the very beginning without actually knowing if there's any good fish in the water, right? They're just hoping something comes. So I think people just need to focus on where they at in their business, narrow in on the data, and then expand out and increase and grow your operation based off of known metrics. And you're going to be growing a healthy, stable company. That way, when COVID hits, all of a sudden you don't have to fire all your cold callers and everything because now you have all this overhead. But yeah.
Awesome. And as far as I know, like, people are kind of looking at, can you kind of run through, we'll make sure to share your link, kind of like what the entry points for like the cost or like what like a service like this for work with your company costs?
So with REISift, our lowest plan is $49 a month. It's kind of like that plan that you just come in and you want to see, what it's all about. Then we have our $99 plan, which is where we start, delving into, higher upload limits and, outbound integrations to be able to send data. For example, you can send data directly into call tools. And we're working with REI Rail right now to do the same thing, Smarter Contact and a bunch of other products. And then our business plan is $299 a month. That includes the highest amount of users in the accounts and inbound integration. So, for example, what a lot of our customers are doing is, they're on our business plans and they're integrated with, say, like call tools. So they're using REISift as their CRM. They're selecting a small amount of data. They send that data to call tools. They call through that data. That's updating the phone numbers real time so they can track wrong phone numbers, DNCs, and all that on that record. And then all they do is they filter then by their basically all records with phone numbers that aren't tagged, send it back to call tools. And if there's something becomes a lead in call tools from cold calling, they send it from call tools back to REISift, and it automatically based off the integration, we'll assign it to your acquisitions person. And then when your acquisitions person logs in, they can only see the stuff they're assigned. So they build the system and process to quickly be able to get to market on data and work through that data, figure out ultimately who you're not reaching so that you can get them in a long-term nurture like direct mail or something more expensive.
And then all of these tools kind of talk to each other in a way you can connect them, or it's some way that you'll be able to connect them easy.
Yeah, more or less. So it's all through APIs or pretty much we have Zapier, and we're also integrating with another product, which is kind of like Zapier, but like 18 times less expensive. So all plans and accounts have Zapier, which allows you to always update data internally. We have a lot of users on like launch control and other products because we don't really want to like only integrate with certain products. We want to integrate with all of them because we believe that people should have the power to utilize the products they're most comfortable with. So if you want to cold call with ZenCall right now, because we don't have an integration directly with them, you can cold call with ZenCall and it'll still update your data real time in REISift so that you can continue to hone in and milk that data. So some users literally just use the REISift for that. Some users use it. I don't know why they only use it for this, but some users literally just upload their data and then only use it for vacancy checking, because every single month we recheck for vacancies on owners and properties, because in REISift you can click on an owner's name, for example, and you can see how many owners they own in your account. So some people use it for that. It's a lot of different scenarios. I think the easiest and most simple way to think about it is REISift is a place to store the data, market through it, interconnect with other places, and then manage those leads afterwards.
Awesome. Yeah, that's pretty cool. And kind of learn a little bit more about you. You have a great background in the military, but can you kind of take us through your business day and what's a typical work day for you? And do you have any special morning routines?
Yeah. So when I was in the military, I was always nights. So my body is like pretty much a midnight kind of guy. And then when I was in the cyberspace, it's pretty much kind of the same thing. Hackers love the night. I don't know, whatever it may be. But that's still me. So that's probably my biggest problem. It's my my bittersweet battle, I guess. Typically, I'm waking up somewhere between 7 and 9, but I don't go to bed typically until 2 or 3. So that's kind of where I'm at. A lot of times my typical day, though, would be 7 to 9. I wake up. I usually make a Americano or a latte with my coffee machine. And then I check my emails and stuff. We use a product called Notion inside my company, which essentially has like my daily journal. I click on it. It opens up and my executive assistant basically puts in there kind of my top 3 things. So I kind of review those and then figure out what I'm going to do for the rest of the day, check my appointments. After that, sometimes I'll smoke a morning cigar. Sometimes, I'll just kind of walk around for a little while outside. Depending on what's going on, I'll take my daughter to school. And then after that, it's just kind of whatever is going on in that day. Mondays are typically reserved for meetings. Tuesdays are typically reserved for content creation. Every day kind of has its pace and its intent. And then after about 5, 6 o'clock, I'm typically done with the majority of like actual work day stuff. And then any other projects I'm working on, I'll usually be working on. Then typically I watch some TV or play some games with my daughter and my wife. And then after 8 or 9 o'clock, usually I hop on my other computer and play video games for a little while and work on my other monitor. And then typically around like 10 o'clock or so, I switch back to work mode again and I start working on other projects that I have, because I have my real estate company, I have my software company, but I still am an entrepreneur that wants to build other companies. So, a lot of people say, well, I'm in a W-2, I can't start real estate. I'm like, well, I had a W-2, I was doing real estate, and then I added something else onto the plate, and then you add another thing onto the plate, you start a podcast, so you continue, the time never goes away. You just fill it with other stuff.
Exactly.
Depending on, I guess what your end goals are. But so typically between 10 then and 2 or 3 is when I'm a pretty big nerd. So I usually have anime up on one monitor, and then I'm usually working on work on the other. And then it just kind of repeats itself. So that's kind of my whole day.
Awesome. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Like I said, I like how kind of people doing in different things and how you do it. It's always cool because it always works out in the end. So that's how it is. So, and then with all your success and all the stuff that you've been working on, all the people that you helped, other real estate investors nationwide, helped them grow their business. What can you say that you're most grateful for?
Dude, man, honestly, right now, I mean, I'm all about the micro, like gratefulness, like simple things. But lately, probably the biggest thing I'm grateful for is just my user base, to be honest with you. When I first started, we had our like accountability groups, and I still do. But it's kind of like now we have over 1,000 users, and every single one of them is like an accountability person for me. They comment in the Facebook group, they tell us about their successes and stuff. And that ultimately really kind of makes me feel a certain way that makes me want to push myself harder. So lately, that's probably what I've been most grateful for. My wife is still active duty. She's getting out. So, without them, that wouldn't be able to happen. And I'm grateful to be alive. I'm grateful for a lot of things, but yeah, grateful for my new coffee machine. I'm grateful so much. But,
yeah, it gets the day started. Huh?
Yeah, but yeah, in general, I'm just super grateful.
Awesome. Yeah, very well said. And what's the best way to get in contact with you? We'll make sure to have the link to your website, but any other contact information you're willing to share with us.
Yeah, so I can be reached at tyler@reisift.io. That's my email. Most likely it'll be Christina responding to you initially, but outside of that, Tyler Austin Original is my IG. And then obviously REISift.io is our company, REISift's website, and FloridaCashRealEstate.com is my real estate company. Other than that, that's about it. We have a Facebook group, the REISift community group. You guys can come hop in and see what's up and ask questions there. I go live and stuff like that. That's the majority of it. Probably if any of the things that we kind of talked about are things that like seem like, hey, that's probably something I should be doing. Probably the thing that's affected and help people the most is a challenge that we came out with called the Auto Lead Gen Challenge. It's by far like had the biggest impact in our user base to help us grow. So maybe check that out. if you have like really a ton of questions, go in the community and then check that out. And that might be something that might be worth it for you. I don't know.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that'd be really helpful. I appreciate it. Tyler, it was a pleasure to speak with you. It's a nice sunny state of Florida. All the best to you and the family and the kids, and look forward to connecting with you again soon.
100%, man. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Everyone be safe.
Absolutely. Take care, my friend.
Thanks.